part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Chase Smith, founder and CEO of Press Play Podcast. You may have heard me on the Orange is Oranger Cleveland Browns podcast with Jeremy Powell, now wonderfully hosted by Holly Wetzel, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast with Sam Amico, or my own podcast, the Chase Smith Podcast. I wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about a brand new subscription-based podcast we're offering this football season, the Press Play Sports Podcast. This premium podcast feed will send all of the sports podcasts offered on the Press Play Podcast Network to one central feed. Yes, you can still follow and subscribe to all of our individual shows for free on every podcast platform. But if you wanted to consolidate your podcast feed and listen to them all in one location, the Press Play Sports Podcast is for you. I'm talking the Oranges and Oranger Browns podcast with Holly Wetzel and Jeremy Powell, Red Guy and Rhoda, Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, Cavs on the Break, the Dennis Maniloff Show, the Ball Card Show, the Premium Fantasy Podcast, a Swing in a Tribe MLB podcast, and the Tim and Shipe Show, a college football podcast, all in one feed. All 9 of our sports shows curated into one single podcast feed. Out the door, you're looking at $5.36 a month after tax. That's $5.36, just about the cost of a drink at Starbucks. And this is only offered on Apple Podcasts. You can't get this anywhere else. It's an Apple Podcast exclusive. Just go to the search bar and search Press Play Sports. It'll come up and you can subscribe from there. We're excited to offer this consolidated, curated sports feed for you to enjoy. And as always, thank you so much for listening and your support.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
That sound means it's time for Cavs on the Break NBA podcast from the Press Play Podcast Network. I am your host, Chase Smith, and with me, he's a senior writer at hoopswire.com. He's our Cavs insider, national NBA writer, Sam Amico. Sam, our last episode was in June. How have you been, man? It's good to see you.
I've been well. Yeah, good to see you too. It's hard to believe training camp is, we're a week away, and I always by June I'm like tired of, I shouldn't say tired of the NBA, but I'm looking forward to a little break. But by this week, I'm like, couldn't we start now? So yeah, I'm back in the.
Well, it's been a weird grind with COVID and the bubble and shortened off season, and everything's been weird. Yeah. But it sounds like you wouldn't make it out as a baseball beat writer because their season never ends, and it's just like it goes
every
on forever.
Every night, no breaks. Yep. No, well, I couldn't do it. It's summer. No, this is perfect for me.
Well, hey, let me tell you who would make it as a baseball beat writer. Joining us in this episode, he is the host of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline on the Press Play Podcast Network. It's a good network. If you haven't heard of it, he's a news anchor in Tampa Bay, Florida, a lifelong Cleveland Cavs fan, the pride of Cleveland news, John Sabol. John, what's up, brother?
What's going on, Chase and Sam? Man, what a title.
Yeah, man.
That's
so I have a
well-deserved.
It is well-deserved. I have a confession to you both. So we recorded, Sam, without you, a live draft show where it was great. We did it on Zoom. We had John joining us. We had our good friend, Chris Mikesell, our resident Detroit Pistons fan. Abby Mueller joined us. We had people join us in the chat. It was great. And that episode got lost in the podcast nether. So,
wow. So the best episode ever recorded was without me, and it got lost.
It was gone.
Quite a story.
It was a live draft reaction, and I'm going to see if I can't still find it and see what I can do. But gosh, that's been lost. So this has to make up for that and everything else we haven't done, Sam and John. So we brought John in to help.
Killer.
We brought John in to help.
We had some good draft reaction that night too.
We did some great stuff, and everyone worked so hard. I'm going to try to see what I can find. But that is out there. That is
this one, Chase.
I'm not going to lose this one. That is all on me. But we brought John in to help us with a little offseason recap, and the Cavs have made some moves. They have just, you thought my hype train was big going into the Okoro rookie season. Oh my goodness. It's hard not to say that the Cavs window is opening, but I'm going to say the Cavs window is opening. Sam, is that appropriate to say that the window is beginning to crack?
Yeah, sure. I think that some of these, you talk about, obviously everybody's excited about Evan Mobley, the number 3 overall pick. And with good reason. He's got size. He's got a lot of tools. He looks, people have compared him to Chris Bosh. So I think that people should be excited about Evan Mobley coming to the Cavaliers. So that's number one. Number two, obviously, Laurie Markkanen. He had 3 very good seasons in Chicago. Last year wasn't a bad year. He just never really meshed or fit in with Billy Donovan. But he has he's a young guy with size and a big upside. So I think that, those 2 moves are your big offseason moves. And they're reason to kind of be excited. Obviously, you're talking, another year of Darius Garland, another year of Colin Sexton, another year of Coro and Allen. Again, those are reasons to be excited about this team, see what they can become. I'll say this, for the first time in the post-LeBron era, I find the Cavaliers to be really intriguing. And I just think that there's a lot of interesting pieces here, young pieces that could be exciting and very, very much worth watching this season, I would think.
It does feel that way. And I want to talk about the Mobley draft pick and the Markkanen trade in a moment, but I just want to kind of rest in this excitement that the Cavs have created, John. There were off seasons where it was just, hey, here's Colin Sexton. He might be a star. Hey, we have this draft with a new coach, and hey, he was fired in 3 weeks. All of a sudden we have a coach we like. We have a draft that we all love. We have a lot of up and coming young players. John, I'm getting really, really excited about this Cleveland Cavs team.
When they didn't trade Colin Sexton this summer, I was a little surprised, but not surprised. But what really got me excited was that Mobley pick, because that was the guy that just couldn't mess up that draft pick in their position. That was the one guy that we knew that we could get, and they didn't fumble it. And that was the guy that they got. And that's someone that can really build. Whenever you get
I feel like we've heard that take before on some draft episode podcast somewhere. Like,
yes. Somewhere buried in the hard drive or you're recycled in or something. But you know what? Like, to me, when you get a 7-foot tall guy like him who can run the floor, like a point guard, and has got a tremendous wingspan. And I mean, you just heard Sam talking about some of the guys that he's been compared to, like a Bosh. I've heard a Kevin Garnett and a Kevin Durant comparison I've read before. Now, I'm not going to say that's who he is now. I'm not going to say that's who he's going to be. I want him to be his own player. But when you have, NBA writers and scouts and people throwing out these names and comparisons to a guy like this, you can't help but get excited.
Yeah. And I'm just a fan. You guys are the experts, and it just has me excited. I feel like there are true stars and future stars in the Cavs now. And we have a supporting cast and veterans that I don't feel like are afterthoughts. I feel like everyone that they've signed or made trades for is very intentional. And I want to talk about that. Going into the offseason, one of the biggest needs was pretty glaring, was the outside shooting for the Cavs. And there was this idea of, oh man, are we going to get a shooter at 3 on crap? Who's the guy it's Jalen Green? Is Jalen Green going to fall to us at 3? What does that mean for Sexton? And it fell perfectly for us, Sam. And it felt like once that pick was in place, and Sam, you can shed your insight and expertise. Once and I felt like they kind of ran to the podium with Mobley, then that kind of set in motion. Oh, now we know what to do with Sexton. Oh, now you know who to target when trades and other signings. Sam, did that Mobley pick kind of set in motion all these other transactions and moves that the Cavs made in the offseason?
It definitely made it easier to get something, take your time and get something good back for Larry Nance Jr. As much as you hated to trade him, because obviously he's a hometown guy.
Yeah, let's pour one out for Larry Nance Jr., man. Has there been a better Cav that's opposed to LeBron? And really
fantastic guy.
Just the best.
Guy.
And not to mention what he did off the court during the pandemic with local businesses and everything. I mean, class act all the way.
Larry, come on Cavs on the break, man. We love you here. We'd love to have you on.
He probably wouldn't be, despite the fact it's the 3 of us, he may not be totally opposed to that at some point. But I just think when you drafted Mobley, it really made it, okay, Larry Nance Jr. is going to be the guy that we're probably going to be able to move and get something good in return for. And you do have to look at, Laurie Markkanen's offensive game is something that they really need. And his offensive game, I mean, you just look at the numbers, is better than Larry Nance Jr.'s, and he's younger and has a bigger upside. Larry Nance Jr. offers some wonderful things, but Laurie Markkanen would be what you would say would be a better fit and fill more of a need.
He's also 7 foot.
He
is insanely huge. And last season, he averaged 13.6 points per game, along with 5.3 rebounds. But this, I think, I think the size, I think like that was a huge thing, but he shot 40.2% from three point on about 5.8 attempts per game. Like, this guy can stroke it, and he's 7 foot. And then they go and sign Taco Fall, who's 7 foot. And all of a sudden, you start looking at this
7'5".
He's insanely tall. And
he went to high school around my neck of the woods down here in Tampa, here in the Bay Area, and then went to college right up the road at UCF.
His first NBA team, he played for the Celtics, and I remember they loved him on that team.
Big fan favorite.
Yes, and so I love what the Cavs were doing. They're addressing their weakness behind the arc. They're getting tall. And don't forget, they re-signed Jared Allen. Like, we still have Jared Allen on the team. This is a team that has addressed the 3-point weakness while getting taller and potentially better on defense with the re-signing of Jared Allen. This has me really, really excited, John.
I am excited, but I do have one quick question, though, and I wanted to get Sam's opinion on this when it comes to Markkanen. We know he's a great 3-point shooter. He's a young guy. He's didn't have the best year under Billy Donovan, as you said. The one thing that perplexed me about that trade with Larry Nance was the contract in that sign and trade deal with him. One thing is, you already signed Jared Allen to that big extension, and then you go ahead and sign Markkanen to that $67 million deal. 4 years? It's $67 million. I feel like the Cavs overpaid a little bit for him. And am I wrong to think that? And I guess the next part of that question, Sam, is if they did, is that out of straight desperation? And how much is that going to hurt them in the cap in a couple of years from now?
It's all arbitrary. Money doesn't matter. Go ahead, Sam. That's my answer.
Well, they probably did overpay for him a little bit, and probably because it was, they explored the trade market with other people, whether it was Chetty, Kevin Love. They definitely, explored trading Colin Sexton. They were getting to the point where it kind of felt like, we're going to have the exact same team back next year with only Evan Mobley. And I say only Evan Mobley by solely being the big addition, which is fine, but you're also talking about a rookie when you talk about Mobley. So yes, there was probably a sense of desperation. We're going to have to pay him a little bit more, obviously, than he was going to get in Chicago. He was just not going to work in Chicago with Billy Donovan. And, Chase just rattled off his numbers. They weren't terrible, but he just was not a regular part of what they were doing there. So to answer your question, yes, the Cavs overpaid him a little bit, but just like anybody, whether it's the Cavs, a San Antonio, a Memphis, Indiana, those mid-market teams, they're going to have to pay a little bit more for guys that, could end up being a risk. But if he pans out, which the Cavs are planning on him panning out, then it would be very well worth it what they're paying him. So, it's just anytime you're in a mid-sized market like this and you don't land a LeBron James in the draft, the rest of your life, especially in today's NBA, is going to be, big risk and big reward type of players.
And I do have to say about that one last point real quick. That last year of his deal, I believe, that's not guaranteed, right?
That's correct. It is not. So it's really 3 years, for what he's making. And then the last year, he has to perform that last year is just not guaranteed.
Hey, let's talk about the Cavs backcourt a little bit, because another transaction they made, they got Ricky Rubio, who is just an incredibly consistent pros pro. What you're going to get from him. And we just signed Denzel Valentine. We're going to talk a little bit more after the break about the rise of Darius Garland. And obviously we have Colin Sexton, which, by the way, I saw a tweet and I don't remember who, and I'm sorry, I can't give you credit, but they put two like characters numbers by each other, two players, and they said one of these is CJ McCollum, one of these is Colin Sexton. Which one is it? And it's kind of hard to tell the difference. The Cavs have a pretty intriguing backcourt. I love the Ricky Rubio signing. Sam, it seems like they're not only addressing the 3-point, but they're addressing the lack of depth too.
Yeah. But I still think they have some depth issues. I do like the Rubio trade. I mean, you traded Prince, who you easily replaced him in some of your other signings and pickups. But I mean, you need veterans on this team. Yep. And, you can't just have all youth or you're going to be terrible. That's just the way it goes in the NBA. You need guys who have been, through the battles. Rubio is one of those guys. He's probably, an okay starter, but he should make a really good backup. He's a guy you're going to bring off the bench, play against other backups. He should flourish just based on experience alone. And he can, obviously, he's an extremely good passer, could be throwing lobs to Allen and Mobley, so I mean, I like that trade. I thought that was a good trade. They didn't do anything that's going to knock your socks off. And I think that the bench is probably, when you're talking about close games, that's what's going to cost them right now. But, it's hard to tell what they're going to do with the bench. Are they going to bring Kevin Love off the bench and Rubio? Well, then all of a sudden you have two guys who with a ton of experience. I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to have to figure something out between Mobley, Love, and Markkanen, who you're going to start, who's going to get more of the minutes as the backup. Those are things that they're going to be, having to figure out, because you have three guys there who can all play power forward. Markkanen can move down to the 3. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments in terms of the bench, but I do think that Rubio was a very nice signing in the sense that he gives them a veteran presence in the backcourt, which they really need.
And you can't discount the help that he's going to give Darius Garland as he kind of matures into this point guard. John, it looks like you're about to say the same thing.
Absolutely. And that's kind of like the Dellavedova, what he was to them. I mean, but maybe more on a much bigger scale, maybe more, obviously more talented. And
there's only one deli in Cleveland, John, and so we're just going to pretend. I can take that out if you want me to. I don't want I don't want the deli hive to come after you.
I love me some peanut butter and deli all day.
Love deli, man. Deli hive,
peanut butter deli time. And I mean, he's a cult, fan favorite. He always will be. Rookie Rubio is going to be a better player. He's also going to be a good mentor, just like Deli was to Colin and Darius. And I think that can't be understated enough.
Yeah. And guys, as a Cavs fan, you're looking around Cleveland, the Browns are just killing it. And, they seem to be all the right pieces in. And all of a sudden you're like salivating that, oh man, the Cavs are making all these right moves. And it's hard not to get carried away. And so before we go to the break here, Sam, what are realistic expectations going into the season? We have, next week, kind of the startings of this next NBA season. What are realistic expectations? Because I need some help. I'm unrealistic. And I just said like the title window is beginning to open. Like that's ridiculous, but I can't help it. I love what they've done. I love what they're kind of building here, Sam.
I think that it remains to be seen. I feel that they're in position of a lot of other young teams. I think the Orlando Magic have a lot of reason to be excited. I think the Detroit Pistons have a lot of reason to be excited. How do these guys, so what the difference is how do your guys fit together? How good is Mobley right away? Is it going to take him a little time? How well of a fit is Markkanen? I still think there are question marks about the backcourt. Garland and Sexton, two very good players. Do they mesh? Are they going to mesh not just on a team that wins 22 games, because they have meshed on a team that wins 22 games. Are they going to mesh as they grow as individual players? I think that this year will be telling in a lot of ways about the backcourt. I don't think, I think it'll be telling a little bit more about Okoro. What kind of player is he going to be? We tend to leave him out of these conversations, but
Not me.
he is a big piece of what they're potentially doing.
Love Isaac Okoro.
and-
Big year
and-
ahead for Isaac
You
Okoro.
hope,
I want to speak it into existence, because this is going to be his year.
like
man.
LeVar Ball. Yeah. So
I mean, he turned it around the second half of last season. We saw a
He
glimpse
sure
of
did.
his offensive
Yeah.
game.
right, and that's usually when guys tend to grow. I mean, you look at Darius Garland, had probably one of the worst years for a rookie starter in the history of the NBA statistically, but last year, all the buzz around the league, everybody I talked to, the opposing players, opposing coaches, that's who they were talking about, was Garland and what improvement he made, and what type of eye-popping potential he has. So, I think Okoro, like you said, second half of last year really started to show some promise. What you want these guys to start doing now is to start believing in these close games that, we're gonna win this. We got enough to finish these games, and we're not just at the point, well, we're down 4 with 3 minutes left, we're young. That's not a conscious thought, but subconsciously it starts to seep in, and we're not really supposed to win on the road against Portland when we're down 4 with 3 minutes left. So guess what? We don't go out and win. When they start winning those games is when you say, you know what, this young core is more than just talk, everybody talking about it. They're showing it. And that's where you really need to see them take that next step. And it maybe not right away. Early in the season, their schedule is just brutal. They're going out on the West Coast right away. They play the Lakers and the Clippers and the Nuggets and the Suns right away at their place. That's going to be brutal. But if when you see the second half of the year towards the All-Star break, which of course Cleveland is hosting this season, you want to see them making those strides after January.
That didn't really help my expectations level temper. I'm still pumped. John, what are some realistic expectations you see the team going into the season, man?
Well, after going 22 wins last season and missing out on that play-in, I mean, I think it's realistic, if everything to go in the right direction, that they could potentially be a team that makes it in that play-in tournament. I mean, I think that's a realistic goal, but a lot of things do have to fall into place. I mean, they have to gel. I mean, they have to be healthy first and foremost. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even talking about Kevin Love. I'm talking about, an unfortunate injury from someone that we're not even expecting. And that's what injuries are, right? So, it's going to come down to how much they're going to be able to really build on this chemistry, because there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And it doesn't matter what sport you're watching. If you have a lot of young players, there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be a lot of close games that they're going to turn out to be losses because you don't know how to finish. We saw that last year, the early part of the season, when the Cavs, had some close games early on, and some of those Eastern Conference games, they just couldn't finish. And so, I expect that to happen again. So I expect this to be a lottery team come spring. I think that's kind of realistic too. So I think it'd be the worst team in the NBA. I absolutely hope not. Could that be a possibility? It could, but they could also sneak into that, play-in tournament. And if that can happen, man, that's going to pay dividends for them going into next offseason, which really gets intriguing and gets really challenging on what they do. And we talked about Okoro's offensive game and how that developed last season. Let's talk about Colin Sexton for a minute here, because if he takes that next big step, and the Cavs somewhat are around 500, maybe a little bit below, but they're improving, and you see some of those growing pains, but you see some adversity and then improving overall. What do they do with him? This is a conversation that I think we'll all have on this pod up until a trade deadline, So what do they do? Do they deal him then, or do they wait into the offseason? Do they give him that extension? I'm not sure I give him that extension right now as we record this in September, but there's a lot of different storylines that can easily trickle throughout here once the season starts and goes through the rest of the year. Yeah. And we haven't even touched on the Kevin Love situation either. Will they ever buy him out? He doesn't think he will. He doesn't want it. He'll still be here. Or do they somehow trade him? Will someone take on the remainder of his 1.5-year contract if that is at that deadline? So realistic expectations will depends on the personnel on the roster too.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Chase, it's interesting. Like, I really think if things go really well, the ceiling is that play-in tournament.
Yeah. And I think that's, I never even honestly, and this just tells you how optimistic I am. I never even thought that they could be a lottery team again and that they could be the worst team in the A, but like they haven't showed me that that's not a realistic outcome. Like everything.
Yeah. I mean, you got to see,
you would think if you're like super realistic, like there's a higher chance of them being in the lottery than probably making the play-in tournament with how like the moves other teams in the East have made.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's my Colin Sexton take, and I'm going to blame this on not having a Browns podcast to talk about the Browns. And so you look at the Browns offense, and Sam just rolled his eyes. He's like, Chase, this isn't a Browns podcast. Well, listen, the Browns have a lot of weapons on offense. When everyone's healthy, OBJ, Jarvis are trying to groom Donald's People-Jones. We have 3 tight ends who all can make plays and catch. We have Nick Chubb. We have Kareem Hunt. And I'm watching games, and I'm saying, why the bleep are we doing a fullback dive who trips and like a yard in the backfield? Why is Baker Mayfield running the ball? And I look at a team who's all about advanced analytics and maximizing players in the most effective way. Like, I don't want Baker Mayfield or our fullback running the football when I would rather have 2 other people run the ball or pass to any other better playmaker to have a better successful play. I say a lot to say this. I think, again, no sources on this, but I think the Cavs might be looking to see really how good Mobley is. And if Mobley is this transcendent player who has the potential to be the best player on the court, I want the offense to run through him. And I don't want players who will take opportunities and balls and shots away from him. But on the flip side of that, I'm going to counterpoint to my point. You watch the playoffs and man, the 76ers would have loved a player like Colin Sexton who would have like, hey, just give me the ball. I can score from the wing. They have Joel Embiid, but they needed someone else. And Colin Sexton has the skill set to where like, man, sometimes you just need a baller who's going to say, hey, I know, we need to get some shots up. I'm going to take care of that. I think there's just a lot of unknowns with the Cavs. I think we love what Mobley could be. There's a ton of talk about who and what Darius Garland is. And I think we kind of know Colin Sexton. I mean, will he take the leap? Maybe, but I don't think a leap that he takes is going to be a transcendent, like he is our first or even second option on what they want this Cavs team to be.
Yeah. And I agree 100% because I don't know what else he can do. You got to remember, we talked about this, Chase, on draft night. Colin Sexton put up some phenomenal numbers. Yeah, we did if we could find it. Colin Sexton put up some phenomenal numbers, and Sam will totally agree with this. But he put up phenomenal numbers on a bad team.
So why are we assuming that we're going to offer him the house? Is my question. Is it because that's what he's going to demand? That's what the market demands? Or like I would love to have a player like Colin Sexton in the playoffs. I don't know if I want him to be taking the development and the ball away from who we think Mobley and Garland could be and Okoro's potential ceiling. And so that's where I'm at is,
yeah.
I don't know, Sam, am I crazy?
Yeah. Yes, but on this point, I think that there's a lot, my feeling on Colin Sexton is I think he's a wonderful player. He plays his heart out. He can score with the best of them.
Facts.
My
tries super hard on defense. He's always given it his all in defense.
He's given it all every time he's out there. There's no question about that. He can fill it up. There's no question
pick you
about
up full
that.
Court. That's ball.
Yeah, and he shows up. He shows up every game. My concern is when you drafted him, and this is a huge thing. People don't realize this. My years of covering the NBA, I've realized this. When you make somebody the face of your franchise and your number one option, there's no going away from that. If you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, you made Colin Sexton your number one option right away. You don't tell him, hey, you know what? You're going to be the next Lou Williams. You're going to come off the bench. You're going to be sixth man of the year. You'll probably make the All-Star team. I'm not saying they should do that, but they don't have that option. And there's a lot of people out in the NBA will say that's his best role. Maybe that's not right, but there's a lot of people saying that around the NBA. That's not going to happen in Cleveland. You're also not going to say you are now 1B or 1C to Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. You just can't say it. You can't tell a guy, you're the face of our franchise. You're the man. You're leading us in scoring. You play your butt off every game. But guess what? We want you to take a step back now because Evan Mobley's our main guy or Darius Garland's going to lead us to more wins. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that the Cavs will want to have that conversation, but I think they're thinking it because, as John alluded to earlier, they spent a big part of this offseason trying to trade him because they don't want to pay him like the number one option because they don't think he's going to be the number one option. Maybe he'll be 1B, maybe he'll be 1C, but they don't think he's going to be 1A moving forward when they start getting into the playoffs and winning games. And it's nothing against Colin Sexton. It's just, this is the reality of who the type of player he is. And the way the NBA is you probably want somebody a little more dynamic as your 1A.
Yeah, I agree, Sam. And, here's the other thing too. It's not an indictment on him. That's just a bad timing for him personally, because after the Cavs drafted him and where they went in the drafts thereafter, I mean, they picked the best guy at the position where they went with, Garland and Mobley and Okoro, obviously not in that order, but it's not like they were trying to replace him early on. They're going with best available and at that point in time. And you can't fault Kobe Altman and the scouts in the front office for that. The problem though is you see almost like, I hate to say a ceiling on him. I feel like I already see a ceiling on him. And the fact that they already tried to shop him this offseason, the Cavs kind of seem to agree. When you see Garland really improve and you see what he's been able to do and what maybe the ceiling's even higher and the way his play may complement the other guys around him better versus Sexton. The problem that I have with the current situation is, and to your point, if they're not going to pay him that, and you're right, they can't tell him, hey, you know what, you're going to be option 2 or 3. And they can't. And they can't trade him in the offseason. They didn't get anything they liked or wanted. Who's to say come trade deadline, hypothetically speaking, this upcoming winter, that the Cavs are going to be able to deal him then? Because at that point in time, the Cavs will lose any leverage that they have because teams know that they're going to have to pay him. Teams know they couldn't trade him the summer before. So, in theory, I mean, anything can happen at deadline. Sam, you've covered that many years, crazy stories and what teams offer and what teams do. But, on the surface, it's kind of like a lose situation in terms of trading him at the deadline, regardless if he, starts averaging 30 points a game.
Yeah, right. Because you're right. Because other teams, it's just like the Simmons situation in Philadelphia where other teams know now that he wants out, not that Colin does, but the Sixers have lost leverage because of that situation. The Cavs could lose some leverage in terms of negotiating trades based on Colin Sexton, centered on him.
Well, hey, let's talk about that after the break, Sam, because obviously I love talking about Ben Simmons.
There won't be a break if I start talking about it now. The break will be
all right. Well, let's take a break. And hey, before we go, today the Cavs signed Denzel Valentine from the Bulls he's a guard. Sam, does that speak to maybe what they're trying to do with Sexton and give him a little flexibility? Does that kind of allude to the league that, hey, like we have the ability
you're certainly
to make
not going to make Denzel Valentine one of your main guys. I think
no, but
I think that I don't think that signing has anything to do with what they might do with Colin, but
all right, it just seemed a little, I don't know, random and ominous. And they're bringing on a guard who, I mean, he's serviceable and
Yeah, I don't think we can look into that when you consider what Valentine did last year when he trucked up that 3 half court in the closing seconds of that game.
Yeah. Sometimes the NBA, more than even the NFL, will make a move. And this is not what Denzel Valentine is, but every once in a while you'll see teams make a move and you're like, why are you bothering with this? Now, I think Denzel Valentine has an opportunity to play and be a contributor. He has still an upside, even though it never really kind of came, revealed itself in Chicago. But I think with him, you're kind of giving a guy almost like an audition. Like, you're going to get every opportunity to come here and make a difference. Are you going to do it? That's more what that signing's about.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the rise of Darius Garland, of course, little Ben Simmons action here in Cleveland, possibly, and more about our young core. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Maria Gincola with Mindful MMJ Ohio. Did you know that medical marijuana has been legal in Ohio since 2016? If you have one of 25 qualifying medical conditions, you can obtain your medical marijuana card today. The most common conditions are chronic pain, including migraines and back or joint pain, PTSD, fibromyalgia, spinal cord disease or injury, and cancer. If you or someone you know is interested in learning more or to find out if you qualify, visit mindfulmmjohio.com and fill out the short pre-qualification form. The process of finding a physician, filling out paperwork, obtaining medical records, and scheduling an appointment seems like it would be a daunting process for most. But, lucky for you, Mindful MMJ Ohio will help you every step of the way to make the process quick and easy. In most cases, we can approve a qualified patient within 24 hours. And the visit is virtual, so you don't even have to leave home. So what are you waiting for? Visit mindfulmmjohio.com today. That's mindfulmmjohio.com. Let us help you be more mindful of your health and find a natural way to find relief from your symptoms.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week, get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it, Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
For the Dennis Maniloff Show, I'll tap into my 40-plus years of following Cleveland sports and 30-plus years of writing and talking about them, so as to bring you informed opinions and analysis of your favorite players and teams. I also will monitor the national sports scene and, when warranted, step out of the toy department and into the real world. And I'll always be on the lookout for special guests. By all means, join us.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swingin' a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
The sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hey, it's Tito, host of the Premier Fantasy Podcast. Get all the news and analysis you need to dominate your fantasy league. I've been doing this as long as anybody in the business. I can help give you the edge in your leagues. It's the Premier Fantasy Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
All right, we're back here. Cavs on the Break NBA Podcast, the Press Play Podcast Network. Sam Amico, John Sabol. We're going to talk about the Cavs young core, the rise of Darius Garland, And you want to talk about getting excited. I love, I've mentioned before my love for Isaac Okoro, but I have been surprised at how much like ownership and territorial I get about Darius Garland, who seemed to have an incredible, really, he stayed healthy last season, which was a huge kind of like red flag that he had, Sam, you mentioned that before the jump, had one of the worst rookie, one of the worst rookie campaigns that someone could have, and really, stayed in his lane, played well, stayed healthy, and then came on near the end of the season. And then all of a sudden he's getting invites to be in the Olympic practice team, and all of these players are raving about him. And just today or yesterday, Steph Curry, Darius Garland, he's going to be special. Darius Garland, he's the guy to watch. Darius Garland. Is this Darius Garland's year? Is this Darius Garland's world and we're just living in it? What's going on with Darius Garland, Sam?
Of all the Cavs young core, he's the guy that I personally think has the highest upside, and think that he's the guy that you could potentially, when you keep the ball in his hands, could change the course of the way things are going. And that's somebody who loves watching Colin Sexton, has a great deal of respect for him. But I think that, here's a little insight for you. There is a faction of the front office. I don't even want to say totally of the front office, but there are many believers throughout the NBA, some very prominent ones, who believe that Darius Garland would be better next to a traditional, quote unquote, traditional shooting guard, say a guy who's a spot up shooter that he's delivering passes to out on the 3-point line. I would say a Ray Allen, but the type of player who's like a Klay Thompson or a Ray Allen or
I think anyone would be a little better if they played along a Ray Allen or a Klay Thompson.
Yeah, well, let's say like a JJ Redick in his prime, type of traditional spot up, spot up shooting guard. That's really, whereas Sexton's more of a scoring guard. Mm-hmm. You talk about a dead eye outside shooter. So somebody in that mold. Obviously, I use some guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, but it wouldn't have to be that type of player, but just kind of say even a poor man's Klay Thompson or Ray Allen. So there's a segment of the NBA who believes that, like, Darius Garland's going to be better if you put that type of player next to him, as good as Colin Sexton is. One asked me, prominent NBA source asked me what I thought about those two. I said that I felt like he would be better next to a traditional shooting guard with Colin Sexton coming off the bench. And the source, who has a lot of pull in the NBA, said, I'm totally aligned with you on that. I think Garland is better suited to be the main man on this team when it eventually starts really winning games. So, and I think that, again, as John said earlier, that's not an indictment of Colin Sexton.
Sure.
It's just people think that Garland has a bigger upside, and probably because he's a little bit better with the ball in terms of delivering it and filling it up a little bit from the outside.
Sam, you had the name Mark Price right there, and you could have just easily said along a shooter like,
yeah, well, that's what he kind of reminds me of. He's kind of type of game for sure.
John, you had Mark Price on your podcast. Did you guys talk about Darius Garland or the young Cavs team? Like, what are his thoughts?
I did. He had a lot to say about we talked a little bit about the draft and who he really liked for them. He liked Cade Cunningham. He knew that he wasn't going to be there. He liked Jalen Green. He liked Evan Mobley. We talked a lot too off camera or off microphone, and just about what they like or what this team really needs. And he sees a lot of Darius Garland's penetration and assist game in his own game.
Sure.
He sees the scoring of Colin Sexton in his own game too. But I kind of got the vibe that Mark wasn't really dead set on which guy is better. We didn't really get into it too much.
Sure.
That could be a conversation, a podcast episode down the road once the season starts. But I don't know. I get the vibe kind of like that Mark had with what Sam has too. It's like you're kind of split, but you're trying to figure out who's the best role. And I think Mark would be in the same boat as Sam, and same thing as me. I think Garland is probably better suited for to be the main guy, to be the distributor, to be that floor general, whereas Colin is that scoring guard.
Yeah.
Do they complement each other? I don't think they do.
No.
Yeah, that's probably where I would say most too is while they play well each individually next to each other, I don't know that they really complement each other that well. Not as much as you would hope from a backcourt where both guards are pretty small compared to the rest of the NBA backcourts. So this to me is a year that you figure that out. You've got to get that figured out.
And Sam, I think they have to figure that out potentially by the deadline. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I think that you have to figure it out by January. I think you're in year 3 of this now. I know people think that year 3 isn't that big of a deal, but you also have to remember that this is a business, and the more you lose, the more money you lose. And, guys like us are always going to pay real close attention to them, and other podcasters and bloggers like myself. But in order to draw in the casual fan, you need to start winning games. And you want the casual fans' money, you got to start winning games. You got to put a product on the floor that's going to catapult you to winning games as quickly as possible while being sensible. And so I say all that because, yes, absolutely, you have to get this figured out quickly this year. And if you think for a second this isn't going to work, then you need to go in a different direction. You need to do that by the deadline, before the deadline. If you want to trade Colin Sexton, if that's a decision that you come to and you're the Cavs, you have to make that move well before the February trade deadline. You got to make it November or December or January.
And when that does happen, if it happens, I would just say be prepared that fans will not like the return on that deal.
No, it'll look bad on paper. It'll look bad on paper, but you have to let it play out just like anything else. If that trade were to be made, I can guarantee you people will think, well, why did we take back a 15 or 14 point scorer as the main part of giving up our leading scorer? But maybe you're a better team because of it. I'm not saying you would be, but you have to be open to that possibility.
So I have a question, and if the answer is no or I don't know, then I'll just take this out of the podcast. But how on earth does Steph Curry know about Darius Garland? Is it only just from a small sample he got in the Olympic, or are they like working out together? And is Darius Garland in like these secret like NBA leagues and games where you don't hear about until 5 years later and there's epic? Like what is going on? How do they know that he's going to be? How are they so impressed with Darius Garland?
I think, Sam, and you'll probably know this better than I do, I think it's both what he maybe limited sample size that he's seen, during the year, maybe the Olympic practices, and maybe just hearsay from other players commenting and then talking to Steph. But he has been working out a lot of other guys. I don't know if Steph is one of those guys, but there's been a big workout contingent that you see on social media of Darius Garland with other NBA players. So it might just be word of mouth too. Wouldn't you agree, Sam? Or maybe all the above?
I think there is, like Chase asked, is there like a contingent of NBA players kind of like just on his side? And I think it's just like any other profession. You see flashes, Steph Curry may guard Darius Garland sometimes, obviously, and sees, wow, he just did that, which Garland has some wow moments. You think about last year's game against San Antonio when Colin Sexton wasn't playing and Darius Garland looked like a future Hall of Famer that game, So I think that these guys, obviously the players talked amongst each other, and Garland has gotten a lot of buzz amongst people that he plays against. And I think it's probably because, for me, like say, obviously I'm allegedly a sports writer. If I see somebody else do something, turn a phrase or something that might be a 21, 22-year-old writer, and I'm like, hey, and I do think this all the time. I'm like, that guy's on his way. He's got potential.
You're talking about me again, Sam. Stop it, buddy. You're talking about me again.
Yeah, right. I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. It was you, Chase. But No, but you think, the guy just needs reps and he could really flourish here. He really has that potential. And I think that that's what the opposing players see in Darius Garland is like, wow, he just did something that's kind of, pretty remarkable there. He just needs reps to be able to do it on a regular basis, and maybe a better complement, not just with Colin Sexton, but maybe better complements around him, and let the Colin Sextons and Evan Mobleys and Isaac Okoros, those guys just need to grow. And then Darius Garland will be even better. So, yeah, I think that sure, it's playing against them maybe in the off-season circuit and training at different gyms and stuff, but I think a lot of it's just guys, doing the simple eye test.
Well, I would love to know for sure if they've had workouts or they've played games, or like if there's any like secret, like, they all flew to like Malibu and they all played ball for like 6 hours one day. Like, those stories fascinate me. And I just,
it happens a lot. That does happen a lot. I don't know about Malibu.
Well, I just said a place that sounds like where an NBA player would go.
Sam, Chase just wants
Montana.
Yeah, Chase just wants an invite so he can show his rec skills.
Yeah. So he can show off his writing skills.
Yeah. Well, hey, one more topic of conversation, and then we're going to go. So I don't have an official timestamp. We're around the 50-minute mark, and we've only briefly just mentioned Ben Simmons a few times. We have to talk about Ben Simmons, and I want to talk to him about the Cavs possibility because it's not going away. Sam, we recorded a Ben Simmons, a whole episode like 2 off seasons ago about could he go on the Cavs, and it's not going away. And I mean, they invited him to their training. Not going to go. Ben Simmons is not going to play another minute for the Philadelphia 76ers, and I want him on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Is that wrong to want Ben Simmons on the Cleveland Cavaliers, John? Do you want Ben Simmons as a Cleveland Cavalier?
Man, we talked about this on draft night too. I mean, I've slowly come around to that only because I didn't like how he, unraveled in the playoffs. But I mean, I guess you could fix that. That's more of a mental game. But
I'd like to see him. I'd like to see the Cavs in the playoffs for the chance for him to unravel in the first place.
There you go. Yeah, you know what though? At the same time, you're right, Sam. He's better than probably what anybody's on the Cavs currently, and you got to get there first. And if he unravels, then great. Maybe he'll at that point overcome his own mental obstacles, if you will. I think if you put Ben Simmons on this team now, would he be maybe the 4th best player the Cavs have had in the last 10 years? LeBron, Kyrie, Love, and Simmons, right? Agree?
I'd put him above Love.
Yeah, especially Love in his prime. I would agree.
You're talking about a guy who really, not to interrupt you, John, but I mean, he does everything very well except for shoot from the outside. I mean, he's 6'10", can handle, obviously, very good penetrator. And dishes off very well, can finish at the basket. Obviously, his problem is shooting, and this team needs shooters. You would have to put shooters around him, so that'd be something to consider. But anyway, go ahead with your point.
He and Darius Garland are pretty tight, are they not?
Yeah, Rich Paul's their agent. Ben Simmons has worked out at Garfield Heights High School. So I mean, he would have no issue coming to Cleveland.
Oh, Sam, don't tell me that, Sam. Oh my gosh, I am so excited.
Go outside.
Already bought a Ben Simmons jersey. I've already seen his big old portrait hanging on the side of the rock. I'm already there cheering. I'm already envisioning our tall defensive studly lineup with all of our tall guys and the defensive lockdown. I've already see it.
You're gonna have to trade, somebody.
Yeah, trade Sexton, Love, and 2 first. I don't care. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So all right, let's play that hypothetical game. I love doing this. This is the old trade machine. It's like little kids when you're trading cards, but you're also trying to figure out how the Cavs could have gotten Michael Jordan back in the 90s, even though that would have never happened. Sam, Cavs would have to give up probably Okoro.
Nope.
Sexton and a bunch of draft picks.
I'm not trading Okoro.
You'd probably have to throw Rubio in there because the Sixers wouldn't want Love, and you've got to make the money work. They would be much more inclined to take Rubio, whose contract expires at the end of the year.
Wait, is Okoro? My heart is breaking right now. Is Okoro like in the? We trade for Ben Simmons. He's in the trade.
No, listen, I'll tell you one
John,
thing
you're
I
messing with
would
my
say.
heart, man. John, come on, bro. You can't just throw my guy in there like that.
Well, that Ben Simmons other than to play him 10 minutes a game. If you're going to play Garland at point and Simmons at point forward, where do you fit Okoro in as your shooting guard? That's a possibility. But the bottom line is, if you're the Sixers, obviously you're going to want, a young, promising player as well as a player like Sexton who can come in and he's going to help you right away. That said, I would be stunned. Let's say the Cavs do make a trade for Ben Simmons, which I do not think is outside the realm of possibility because they're trying and they're gauging. You're probably going to bring in a third team. You're probably not going to make a straight up whoever, Okoro, going to the Sixers for Ben Simmons. I think it's and Rubio or whoever. I think that you're going to have to pull in a third team to help facilitate trade. Is moved. The odds are it's going to be like a 3-team deal, 4-team deal. So that way the Sixers are getting back a nice young player as well as a veteran player on the wing, which, the Cavs can give them a nice young player in Sexton. They would probably, the Sixers would also, because, if they're going to trade him, which they most certainly are, they're going to want it to help them compete for a championship, not just fiddle around in the playoffs like they have been. They want it to take them to the next level. Sexton could help with that, but he alone is not going to do that. He's not worth it if you're the Sixers to say, we're giving up a proven all-star 6'10" point guard for a guy who is a guy who frankly leads a bad team in scoring. That's not enough for Ben Simmons. Sorry, it's just not. So you would probably have to bring in a third team to make that deal work if you're the Cavs and Sixers or anybody who wants Ben Simmons. So I as fans, we tend to think of it as a straight up, Sixers Cleveland trade. I really don't think it would be worth that while. And if the Cavs want Simmons, they will have to bring in somebody else and say, hey, can you help us out, make this trade with us, and we'll give you a draft pick or something. So that's one way to think about it.
And Sam, you mentioned the potential Rubio. They can't trade him till October 1st, which means, that doesn't really make a difference in terms of what they can do or what they can't do. But just in terms of if the Sixers were trying to find a trade partner before, training camp, before the season gets underway, then they're going to have to look potentially, if they looked at the Cavs or a third team, Rubio couldn't be dealt until October 1st. It's not a big deal at all. Interesting point when you talk about Simmons and his contract. Whoever does land him, that will have him under contract for 4 more years, including this current upcoming season at a ridiculous clip of, like, I think his contract goes from $33 million this upcoming season, and his last year is like $40 million a year. So you're not only, if you're Cleveland, you're not only looking at this in terms of the short term, but also the long term with the financial issues too, because you're going to look at your cap and you're going to look at, okay, you're going to, try to re-sign Darius Garland long term as well, because you already have Allen in this past summer too. So that's a big financial commitment.
It'd be a big financial commitment, and you'd have, you would have to do, you'd have to make still have a little bit of work to do on the roster. You couldn't just get Ben Simmons. You would certainly have to find somehow, some way, some perimeter shooting, that traditional shooting guard that I mentioned before. You'd have to find some other help somewhere. But to me, he struggles obviously greatly to shoot from the perimeter. He won't shoot threes. He can't shoot threes. He can't shoot free throws. He's a 56% career shooter anyway, and that's because he can get to the basket and finish. He's got good size. He's got a nice touch around the hoop. He just does, anything outside of 10 feet's an adventure. So you've got to find some shooting if you bring him in. I personally like the idea of adding him for the Cavs. It gives you immediate buzz. You have an immediate all-star. When you draft, you're looking to draft a guy like Ben Simmons that will come in, be an all-star right away, improve your team, sell jerseys like crazy, profess that he loves it here. I know he would come in and there would be no qualms about playing in Cleveland. He'd be thrilled with the change, and he would, people who don't like Ben Simmons are probably the ones who watched him play the fourth quarter against the Hawks, and that was it. This guy was terrible, whatever. She was afraid to shoot, whatever. Look, the guy's a magnificent player, and he's a magnificent defender. He is one of those all-stars who plays super hard during the regular season. I think the fans would think totally different about him if he were here. That said, you'd have to be careful not to mortgage the farm, because you would still have some work to do around him in terms of adding shooters and stuff. But you're talking about, you add him almost right away. Say Sexton's the guy you give up, and Okoro ends up being a guy you give up, and Rubio, you're going to be a better team right away. Maybe, in 5 years, I can't answer that question. Neither can the Cavs. But right away, you are a better team. You're a more dynamic team. You're a team that other teams are paying attention to, as well as, frankly, you're getting on TNT and ESPN, and that makes you more appealing to free agents than your once a year, we got to put the Cavs on TNT once a year. It's a league rule. That's why they're on now. You become a player in the NBA, and guys would want to play next to Ben Simmons, especially when he has such a powerful agent, Rich Paul. That's attractive to free agents. So I think if there's a deal there to be had, I don't know that there is. I would put it less than 50%. But if there's a deal there to be had, I think that you make it because you suddenly become relevant right away, as opposed to just the same 50 to 100 people that are talking about it all the time in Cleveland.
Yeah, Sam Vegas puts it even lower than that. Here are the current odds for Ben Simmons' next team. Portland Trailblazers.
Vegas ever done?
Portland Trailblazers minus 120. So they're saying that it's more than yet likely going to happen. Trailblazers minus 120. They were plus 1,100, and just over the past couple of days moved to minus 120. The Rockets plus 250. The T-Wolves plus 325. Golden State Warriors plus 750. That would suck for everyone in the league. If that's not a Golden State fan. The Kings plus 900. I think would be the funniest outcome for Ben Simmons. I don't think it's going to happen. But that's it. The Spurs plus 1,200. That would probably be best for Ben Simmons and best for pure basketball. But pop with Ben Simmons would not be good for anyone in the West. And the Lakers plus 1,500. That's not going to happen. They're just throwing that up there to get free money.
So I think the best odds are actually Houston, in my opinion.
Yes,
and then Sam, I always thought that the NBA had a rule where you had to put a team in one nationally televised game a year when it comes to TNT, ABC, and ESPN. I thought that had to be at least one game, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you look at this year's Cavs schedule,
none. Yeah, they get NBA TV. Well,
for 4 games.
Yeah. I think if you get an extra NBA TV game if you don't get on TNT. But yeah, I mean, that's my point, is that plays a role. It sounds silly. That plays a role.
Oh, no doubt it does.
Where guys might sign. Well, Cleveland's terrible. I don't even know who's there. You know what I mean? So that plays a role in things. And at some point you have to become, you can't just say, hey, we're excited about our core 4, because frankly, I've heard that from about 8 teams. We're excited about our core 4. The Pistons literally call their 4 main guys their core 4.
Yeah, they're still stuck in the Fab 5 era.
Yeah, right. But regardless, I mean, at some point, if you want to start winning games and start being relevant before we're all 80 years old, then and I'm probably quite a bit closer to that than you two, but even if we add up you two, but my point is that you can't just keep saying, well, we're going to be good in 5 years. At some point you have to say, let's make this move. Let's do this. Let's become relevant. And this will speed up the process of what we want to become, which eventually, again, is a championship contender. Well, we have an all-star. That's the first step to becoming a championship contender, is a proven all-star. So I think that if you're the Cavs, you do consider that, and you consider mortgaging a lot, but not the farm for sure.
Well, Sam, I'm considering this one of the best offseason recap podcasts that we've ever done. This is
like 7 hours long.
It's been pretty fantastic,
and I hope it's next week already.
The training camp starts actually now. I got to go, and the Cavs called me. They want to see how I can do against Valentine's half-court shots. But no, it's been great to talk to you, Sam. John, thanks for coming on board. That does it for this episode of Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Thank you all so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. Shouts to John Sabol. John, you're going to help us out a little bit this season with the Cavs on the Break, huh?
I am. I'm excited to join you guys and be a part of the Fast Break team here, and of course with my podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network as well. So it's been great so far, and we're gonna have a great season. A lot more to talk about, and I can tell Sam's already getting excited about all of our fun hypothetical trade conversations.
Yeah. Look, with the network growing and, I'm just trying to use my time wisely. I handed off the hosting duties to the Orange to Holly Wetzel full time. I'm not even on that pod anymore. And that was a hard decision, but I'm going to stick around here. Cavs on the Break this season. John and I are going to split hosting duties. Sam, it's time to see other people, man.
I know I'm a little bit heartbroken by this. I'm usually the guy who breaks up, but
it's not you, it's me. Okay.
Yeah, you're still going to be coming around. That's the worst.
Yeah,
part.
I'll still be around.
I
still have my toothbrush in your bathroom. It's not like I'm going anywhere.
You're not really going away. You're just
right.
You're dating other people.
It's a humbling lesson.
Me date other people, I guess, is what you are doing.
To learn that the more I give up with the network, the more that it grows, and that's a humbling lesson to learn because I love doing as much as I've been able to do, but. I believe this could be something special, and it can't be special if I'm doing everything. And it helps when you have incredible people to hand it off to. And so John's going to help, and Sam, we're going to make sure that we can get you some content consistently for hoopswire.com. Make sure you check that out. hoopswire.com. And John, I'm looking forward to working with you, man.
Yeah, I am too. It's going to be fun, man. I'm really pumped. Thanks for having me and helping out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Cavs on the Break. We always follow back. Follow Sam at Amico Hoops. And John, I have to, say I know the draft episode got lost in the ether, but we always end this podcast with a shout out to Mike Breen, just simply saying, Mike Breen, take us out. And you can be as silly as normal, as much gusto or whatever you want, but we do need to hand it off to Mike Breen at this time.
All right, hopefully Sam approves of my tag out here.
I have low expectation.
Mike Breen, take us out.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.